My name is Alexandre Pape. I used to be a solution architect for the customer data in SAP, and I work in products, focusing still on the customer data. And I'm reaching you from Melbourne, Australia today. If just a few comments, if you see that I drop, it's because my neighbors decided to turn on their microwave a bit too strong and my Wi-Fi drops, but I have another one as a backup, so just bear with me and I'll join back in after a minute or so. The subject of today is about you leveraging SAP Customer Data Platform to go from the typical disconnected silos that you find in lots of enterprises IT landscape to end up with an actionable customer 360, right? So it's one of the promises of CDPs in general, but especially looking at the diversity of events that we can actually gather and the richness of these events, and being capable to not only gather all these activities to build a 360, but also enrich the information that comes in with insights that are generated by the CDP itself, and then be able to leverage that information to either being consumed by other systems or actually triggering and orchestrating other systems downstream. So I'm going to start with, I don't know how many of you will actually be working in parallel and actually going through each of these steps, but there's a few steps kind of to prepare the setup. So I'm assuming you got access to the GitHub page that I have here on screen. If not, I think there's a system of Q&A, so people will be able to kind of pass that on to you if you missed it. But if you're attending, I'm assuming that you do. In terms of setup, because we're going to kind of use a mock commerce site, and we're going to see how to actually capture the data on that mock commerce site, which means that we'll be touching a bit of the code on the front end to see how we can actually capture that information, and we will be running like that website locally, right? So in terms of prerequisites, I think I don't know how many of you kind of got prepared, but you basically just need nodes installed, and that should be, and Git obviously, and that should be enough to get you started. So I'm going to start kind of going through these steps just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. That should, take us a few minutes, but the end result of that is that we will have like that, like a fake commerce website running on the platform. We'll be using another hosted website on WooCommerce, which I have here, but we'll use that a bit down the road. Notice that the link will be on the GitHub, so you should be okay as well. One important remark as well is that everyone, I think there was an Excel spreadsheet or you actually got credentials to access the SAP Customer Data Platform. So likewise, I'll show you how to, what it looks like when it's empty, and I'll use mine, but you should have your own, so no one kind of, steps on each other's toes. So we should be all good, okay? So let's start with just preparing the environment. I have, we'll be running like 2 servers through nodes. So that's why I have like that split window, but I'll start working just in that one and just, go through the steps of actually cloning the main code repo, right? So I'll just start by doing that. So bear with me, there's going to be a bit of download and a bit of compilation, right? Now that it's done, I actually have that folder that was created. So I'm just going to get in there. And in there, there's, first of all, there's kind of all these exercises and everything that is actually specified here. But the code itself is going to be in the shopping cart app there. So I'm just going to go get in there. And in there, you'll see that we'll have like enough to actually set up the node configuration. And there's another kind of folder server, which I'm going to go into in that other window, so we can kind of have both of them kind of running at the same time. So let me go where I should be. Right. So we have these two environments. Just a quick remark for the, well, let's start just kind of building the installing all the dependencies. So I'll just go and npm I. That process is going to take not a few minutes, but a few seconds. And as soon as that one is done, I'll do the same on the smaller folder inside. Just a quick remark for that one is that I think it works better if you delete the package log JSON. So I'm just going to do that. And as soon as the first one is done, I'll do the second one. If some of you are kind of Node, experts, just bear with me because I'm not. So if I say something stupid, just put that on that. And it's just to have that environment with a mock website so we can play around. We can play around with everything. So as soon as it's done, I'll be running the same process on the second one. I'll also open a code editor on the side so we can kind of start looking at the what we're going to be doing. But just bear with me while we go through these kind of setup steps. If you are doing the exercise at the same time and you actually have like a better internet connection than me, you might already be done, but it shouldn't be too much too long. Maybe while it does that, one thing that I can do is that I can actually go and show you the CDP empty space. So I'm just going to grab the credentials that I'm going to be using. So there's you should all have like one that was assigned to you, but in my case, I'm just going to use that one. The login and passwords are okay. The logins and the passwords are the same, so bear with me where I'll log in. And you will see in that environment, oh, just a quick note, I think two-factor authentication is set up, so you'll need to go through that. Hang on, let me just start over because I had like a session before with another one. I don't want to mess it up, so let me just set it up properly again. All right. Ending with, hang on, let me hide the Zoom stuff. I need to make sure I'm with the right user, because it looks like, yeah, it looks like my previous one. So just bear with me while I sign out and sign back in the proper. Oh, I think what happens is that I'm using the wrong one. I should have used that one. That's what's happening. Just bear with me. Basically, you don't have that problem because you just have one, so you should be okay. So here you go. So because it's the first time I log in, I'll be asked to actually provide a two-factor authentication system, and you should all have to go through the same process. I usually recommend using an authenticator app. So yeah, I guess you can see I have my phone here, and I'm just going to use the authenticator to create a new. So I'll select like time-based authentication here, which generates a QR code. I'm just adding the QR code with the app, which gives me a second code. And hopefully this is the right one that I'm going to be using. Paste, remember the computer, and you should be in like that. Okay. Now you can just, save the password login and you'd be kind of ready. And here you have like customer data platform, like you should have your own environment which is completely ready and completely empty. I mean, not so empty. You'll see that you actually have an added box kind of customer schema. It's very basic, just have the profile, and we'll be playing with that a little bit, right? So we're going to kind of make that grow. We have a type of activity that is just for orders, and we're going to do a lot more there in a minute. But in terms of what the database has, it's empty. There's no applications, no sources of information, no destination for the information. So you should have that completely pristine environment where which we're gonna be using in the different exercises. I see that behind the scene, the NPM is finished. I'm just going to be doing the same NPNI here. It's much faster. It's much smaller if I recall correctly. In order to get like the fake WooCommerce, I mean not the fake, like the local instance of WooCommerce running, we need some credentials, as you can see. So you should have to go in and click on that link here, so you can actually get that JSON file, the credentials for WooCommerce, which you need to place in the right folder, right, in the server folder, as we've been using today. So let me get that, because I think I did that earlier today, so I already have it. I can just take that file. I even had that version earlier, and I just go into kind of my where I'm using in the proper folder. So you just go into server here, and you can just paste these credentials, right? So this is going to be needed so we can actually run the other one. So at that stage, I have the CDP that is kind of, set up and running. I have all the code base of the mock commerce website that we're going to be using, and the two kind of NPM nodes applications that actually are needed for it. So I'm going to go and start it, right? So I can just go NPM start here. And we'll go back in there as we kind of make changes to the code base. So a bit of compilation. I think I can just do an NPM start in that one as well. And that's why I'm kind of having these two windows. So here you go. You have like kind of the back office system and the backend system and the mock website. And then you can just go to localhost 8000, which I kind of have ready here. So if I reload, you might get like it goes to HTTPS, and you might not have like a certificate configured. So you might have to actually accept like an exception, but you should be kind of ready to go at that stage, right? So you have that local website that is running on my computer, and we'll see what the code is looking like. And we have the CDP instance that is ready to receive all that information, right? So we'll all very, very soon be ready for the first exercise. So we did that, we got the access. The one extra thing that I'm going to do is that I'm actually going to go through, sorry, just bear with me. I'm actually going to go through my Visual Studio Code here, and I'm just going to add the folder that have been been created. So just bear with me. That's in Dev, TechEd. And I can just use that one, right? So I just open that, and as you'll see, it's because it comes from Git. If you have like the proper kind of GitHub or Git add-ons into your environment, you'll be able to do, to kind of go through the different exercises, and that's what I'm actually going to be using. I will navigate in the different branches just to kind of speed up and make sure that I don't mess up any of the code. But most of it is in the source folder here. You have the index HTML that we're going to be touching. You can see it's very, very basic and using Angular. So again, if you are a specialist environment, just be aware that I'm not. So bear with me if I'm saying something stupid along these lines. But it's going to be pretty straightforward, right? So at that stage, hopefully, if you have questions, you can use the portal to actually ask them. But we are ready for the first exercise. Okay. So let's go. There's a link here to all the exercises, but I had it here. So we're going to start with exercise 1. Maybe just maybe I can start kind of mentioning the types of exercises that we're going to be doing, right? So the first one, the very first exercise we'll be doing is that we will take that website and that website doesn't have any kind of login capabilities yet because we will be adding that down the road. But however, we still want to be able to capture anonymous users' kind of behaviors, and that's what we'll be doing. We will be leveraging the Customer Data Platform SDK that we will add onto that website, and we will use that to capture people's behaviors when they when they start clicking around and add stuff to their carts. That's going to be the one thing that we're going to be focusing on, right? So that's the first step that we're going to take. The second step is that we are actually going to use another SAP product, Customer Data Cloud, to add a registration and login capability to the website. And we will be leveraging the connections that we have between these two SAP products to actually fill in the information about these anonymous users with the actual first-party data that they provided during the registration process and whatever onboarding that we decide to build. Here is going to be very, very simple, but hopefully that will give you an idea how it should work, right? So that's going to be the exercise number 2. It's very simple. You'll see a fair amount of, not a fair amount, a reasonable amount of configuration at the Customer Data Platform side and a little bit of code. And then exercise 3 is that we are going to use another WooCommerce application, the one that is already hosted, to actually start to see how we can ingest the order events. So at that first stage, we'll be kind of focusing on the add to cart type of event. So showing just the intent about things. The other one will show you how we can actually get like proper order information from an actual hosted WooCommerce instance. So you can have a good idea of what it looks like, right? And we will be building that product, that profile, adding all these activities. First, I add to cart, then I register, and I get like the first party information. Then I start having my first orders. And the last stage is that we'll kind of gather all of that information to determine whether this is a VIP customer or not. Obviously, we'll simulate on very low numbers, so I can become VIP pretty early in that demo today, or in that workshop today. But this is what we're going to be doing, right? So really building that customer 360 step by step, as consumers progress on the sales funnel. They will engage more, and we will grow progressively that profile within Customer Data Platform. The last exercise, I don't think we'll have time to do it, but there's enough information in there to there's a lot of simulation of a delivery. Take it as a kind of a optional exercise for those of you who want to go like one step further afterwards. But all the information is actually in exercise 5 here, right? But we're focusing on 1, 2, 3, 4 today. So let's jump into exercise 1. So exercise 1, as I said, it's about getting insight on anonymous customers, right? And for that, we'll be going through a few steps here. I have that very same screen, very same page on another screen, so I won't be showing it too much. I'll go back to it so we can see the progress that we're having, right? But basically, the things that we're going to do here is that we will be defining a new type of activity, which is basically when people add something to the cart. So we'll do that one, so we can capture that information. Then we will be going through the adding what we call a web client application. So it's basically the inbound, the connector for information that comes from the SDK, right? It's pretty simple, you'll see. I'll kind of change that as we go through, but I'll explain why. Because I'm not using that domain, I'll use localhost. So we'll need to kind of change that configuration a little bit. So we'll be doing that. And then, we will listen to the SDK for the add to cart type of event. So we'll see how we can actually design that. And that's where there's going to be a bit of code that we'll need to do, but it's pretty straightforward. But you'll see when we get there. And then we will start generating insights about that. So we'll be counting the number of products that people add to their cart. focusing on people who add shirts to their cart. So we'll build what we call an activity indicator, which is going to be counting based on the product category. So only counting the t-shirts rather than all these add to cart activities. And based on that, we'll be building segments, right? So you'll see how we can go through all these steps, right? So let's jump into it. So the first step that we need to do is to define a new activity, right? So for that, you go into, whoops, I need to remove the stamp feature, otherwise this is not going to be helpful. So we'll be going into, and each time, as you can see, there's a link to the actual documentation where you can kind of get more information about it. So I'll just click on one so to give you an example. So here it's how you can actually define new activities in Customer Data Platform, right? So it's basically just using these steps that are described in documentation, but we'll be doing it for real here. So the first thing is we'll need to create a new activity with three attributes, right? As I said before, in an empty space like that, in the customer schemas here, in the schemas kind of section, you see there's one activity. It's called orders. But we will be, actually, it's something that you might want to do right now, even though it's something that we'll be doing on the exercise 2 or 3, if I don't remember, but it's not in the instruction. So you just add a name, right? Just to show you how you can actually customize these orders. So when we receive an order, there's going to be like there's going to be a SKU, there's going to be an amount, but we also want to have the name of the product. So just to show that we can do that, because we're going to be using that later down the road, just add that very simple attribute. So just click on create node, and then it's a string, so it's all good, and give it a name and press OK. That's enough. But what we're going to do now is that we're actually going to create a brand new activity. And businesses, I mean, it varies immensely, right? If you are, a utility, or if you're like a CPG, or if you're a telco, if you're health or insurance or whatnot, the types of engagements that you will have with your customers is going to change dramatically, right? The one that is kind of, standard across most industries is the orders, but maybe for insurance company would be like asking for a quote. So like a new quote would be like one type of activity. For more retail space, there might be more activities that are lighter touch, like more behavior oriented. So it's really just about it's a kind of a business analyst exercise that you need to do to kind of decide, okay, what are the key activities that I want to model within the Customer Data Platform, knowing that then I'll be able to leverage them just to gather information, of course, and build that 360. But also when there's a new activity that comes in for a specific user, you might want to orchestrate some kind of engagement with an outside system. So it's really it's very interesting kind of exercise, I have to say. But here we'll be just working with a few very simple ones, just the orders and the cart. So let's start and add the cart one. Oh, let me save first, because I made a change. So that makes kind of sense that I save first. And now I'm going to add a new activity. And as I said, that activity is going to be called, we'll call that cart, as simple as that, right? You can give it a bit of a color and a bit of an icon. So here it's about a cart. So I put a shopping cart. It makes sense. And I press OK. And you can see that activity has an identifier. So you should keep it. And you'll probably be able to, if you have like cart IDs in the system that in the commerce systems that you use, you'll be able to leverage it and to actually map the cart ID to that ID in the activity, which allow us potentially to support updates of that cart down the road, right? But here we'll just keep it simple, and we're just going to add the 3 attributes that we were asked to add, which is a string, the product name. So I'll just say, product, right? I'll keep it as a string, easy peasy. Then the second one is going to be the category, because category, and you go. And the third one is going to be the date. So you put a date, but it's so much a date that we'll use the type date. All right, that way it's going to be kind of recognized as a date, right? You can choose, you can add descriptions, you can display, use a if your fields are, if the attribute names are very technical, you might want to have something more meaningful, so you can change the display name, right? But here we just keep it simple. So we have our new activity here. It's just for cards, right? And I'm just going to save it. So we did the first step in the entire exercise. I just go back to the order one because I think I wanted to add a bit of color there as well, just so that we can, so orders are going to be with a credit card. It makes more sense. Save that. So it's going to look better in the 360 afterwards when we actually check for users in the database. Okay. The step two, so what we did is that we did that first step here. We defined that first activity. And now we need to kind of prepare for the inbound information coming from the front end. So we need to create what we call a web client application. And it's pretty straightforward. You go to your source, section here. And as you can see, we don't have any source of information. So we need to add some, right? So we'll click on Connect Application here. And we'll be looking for, you have like a custom application category at the bottom. You can see there's a fair amount of them there, right? So depending on where you are, or what you have in your IT landscape, you might want to leverage a few of these, which are kind of, the connectors that we actually provide. You can also build yours using the Connector Studio, but that's kind of the content of the exercise number 5, and it's a bit more advanced, right? So we'll keep it simple for now, and we'll just use that custom applications. You can see here the web client application. So that's what we're going to use. So I just click on Create. And I can actually pre-activate it. I'll just need to give it a name. So this is going to be like the web. Well, it's I call that commerce because it comes from like the mock-up client, the mock-up commerce, sorry, that we have. If you have like conflicting information, you can actually like put a quality rank here. We just leave it as average, and we're not going to be covering these more advanced scenarios in any cases, but just so you know, that is something you can do if you're, depending on the source of information and its quality, you can actually flag it appropriately. So I've created my mock commerce web application. There's one thing that we need to do as specified there. We kind of need to help CDP kind of protect its own APIs and make sure that we only allow messages coming from a specific domain, right? I think if you actually are hosting that server on something else than localhost, you actually need to change and use that as the trusted domain, right? So here, in order to change that, you go back to you go to Edit in there, and you can see, I mean, you can add like a logo URL if you want. But here, what matters the most is that you see trusted domains here, and you can have several, right? But here, for me, it's just simple. It's just going to be localhost, right? But again, if you are hosting your node application on online proper, where there's an actual domain, you might want actually to do it. But here, I'm just using localhost. So I save that. So I'm ready to do the next step, which is, for now, we kind of set the stage to be able to receive things from the web, right, from the front end. But we need to specify what types of events do we actually want to receive, and that's the next stage in the exercise, which is we need to create a new type of event, right? And we'll see how we do that. Well, actually, it's just going to be that bit. It's pretty simple. So just maybe copy paste that, because the name of the event is going to be important. So just make sure that either you type it in correctly or just copy paste that actual name. And we will be creating a new event, right? Events are inbound payloads, basically, right? So I click on that. I give the name that I said. This is first-party CRM, or maybe it's visitor data rather than first-party data, because we're kind of anonymous. I'm not touching the processing purposes because it's about like kind of consent management. We will be covering that in one of the subsequent exercises. So we should be good to go and go to the next stage, right? And the first thing that we want to do is that we want to so these a few of these that payload that the SDK is going to send already has all these fields kind of pre-configured, right? So we don't need to care about them ourselves, but what we care about is that we care about the extra piece of information that we actually need in there, right? So as the instructions say, we're just going to be using product and category and two string attributes. Then we're going to add to that the data model of that inbound event, right? So I just use product, and hopefully I'm not going to mistype anything. Right, but talking and typing at the same time is really see, that's a recipe for disaster, because that's not the thing. So at first I need the product, which is a string, okay, and now I need category, which is another string attribute. So we now are, and that's what we're going to be pushing from the front end, right? We'll be pushing all that information that is going to be provisioned automatically in the inbound payloads, but we'll be specifying through the code the product name and the product category that people actually add to the cart. And that's what we're going to be ingesting, right? So I click next. And now I need to actually map that information, right? So when people actually, click on there, you can see that the device ID, which is again provisioned automatically by our SDK, is already mapped to one of the identifiers that is defining our out-of-the-box data model from a profile standpoint. But what we're interested in right now is the activity of someone who added a card. It's not going to change. We're not going to learn the first name there, right? What we're going to learn is that we're not going to learn anything about the privacy. What we're going to learn, well, nothing about a new order, but we are going to learn about these cart activities, right? And that's what we're going to be mapping. Right, so I can just map the respective fields there. So I have an event ID that I can map to the ID. I have a product that I can map to the product. I have a category to the category, and the timestamp can go into the date. Easy peasy. I press next, and that next screen gives you the code that you can actually use, and this is going to be important. Because even though, again, I'm going to be cheating a little bit and just like jump into the exercise so I don't mess up typing any information, you'll need to actually use your own, you see the identifiers of your business unit, so your kind of your actual CDP environment. So you need to take that. And the application ID is, again, it's the name of that mock, it's the identifier of that mock commerce application within CDP. So these two identifiers are going to be specific to each and every one of you guys. So you really want to actually copy paste, these values proper, right? But we'll get into it in a second, because that's the next stage, right? So we've created that new event. We've extended the data model. We mapped it to the cart activity. So now we actually need to go and do some coding on the front end so we can load the SDK and then do, Angular things that I'm not like super comfortable with, but as you see, everything is kind of prepared, and I'll point you to where you need to change. But basically what that code is going to do is that when people actually, so apart from just, loading the SDK, what we're going to do as well is that whenever someone adds something into the cart, we're just going to call that extra, that method here, which is then going to notify CDP about, oh, someone actually, added something to the cart. And that's why, that name is so important, because that's what the code needs to be consistent with the name of that event. And then we will actually provision the category name and the product name automatically, programmatically as part of that, right? So let's jump into the code part, and hopefully it makes sense, right? So I'll go to the, I'm in the index here, and I'm going to be cheating, because I'm going to leverage the full branches. No, I want to go to remote and get like the the exercise one here, and you can see here the 3 files that were actually changed. So I'll open each of these so we can kind of change them one by one. But you can see here index.html. What we're going to do is that we're going to just add these lines as they were specified in the snippet that was provided at the end of the in here, basically, right? So this is that very snippet. Let me just press done here so it's saved, and I can still go back and show you here. If you save and you want to see the snippet again, you can just come back here, right? It's always going to be available. So step one, we actually want to make that, but remember, we actually need our own identifiers, right? So that's kind of the first step that I'm going to do, is that I'm going to load the actual branch so I don't mess it up. Oh, you know what? I think I can just do it. Okay, so we know that I'll just copy paste cleanly, hopefully. So I add, let's be consistent, just after the head. So I place myself here, and I just paste the snippet here. But remember, I need to update these identifiers because these are not correct. So I just take these 2 lines here, and I place them there. All right, so you can see I have now my business unit ID and my app ID, which is, again, that matters very much. So I can save that bit. So our index.html is actually ready and updated now. The other file that is modified is let's start with that report service in the code, right? So it's in source app. So I'll just go into source app. I close index because we're done with it. Source app, and we have that report service. So let me just open it up and go back here and just kind of see what we need to inject, right? Pretty simple. We basically need to fill in the constructor and the add to cart following the what was instructed. So I can just I just take the entire the entire body here. So after the injectable thing, I can just replace all of that with that new class, which is report service, right? And we fill it in with a constructor that will kind of extract or leverage the event name and the payload, and then actually send the payload as part of to the CDP, basically, right? So it makes sense. Again, I'm not a Angular or Node for that matter expert, but it does make sense when you explaining like that. So that's the second modification we need to do. And the third one is that we actually need just to declare that report service, right? So pretty straightforward, and that's going to be happening. Oh, sorry, there's another one here. Oh yeah, we'll need to. I'll get to that in a second. So let me add the report service in the constructor. That one is in source app shared. I think I know where it is. So it's in source app shared services, and they should be, what was the name of it? Product services. So I'll go there, and there should be a product service. Hang on, let me know exactly where it is. Oh, I can just open it. Okay, here you go. No, that was the wrong one. That's why I couldn't find it. That's the one. Here you go. So product service, which is in source app shared services. That's where it was. And what we're going to do is that we're going to kind of, oh, I got the wrong one now. I need to click there. So I have both the file that I'm going to edit and kind of what I need to be editing. So here I just need to declare that one, right? So it's pretty straightforward. Oh, I'm on the wrong thing. That doesn't help. Here you go. So I'm adding the report service class that we just kind of finalized there. And also what we want to do, we want to go to the add to cart function that is already existing in the app, and just actually use the report service to actually pass that information to CDP. So let me go to add to cart here, which is 119, if I'm not mistaken. So add to cart, you can see this is where the kind of traditional rest of the application would be. And here I can, just as a side note, obviously each front end can use like a pretty diverse set of technologies, right? So at the end of the day, the SDK is just a JavaScript SDK. So if you want to deploy things using like a tag manager, what matters in the end is just that you make that call to, you know, that method, where you got the information, how it's actually linked to the behavior of the website. Obviously heavily depends on each website, right? But you can see here in that add to cart kind of, you know, method that I had pre-existing on my application, I had access to the product name and the product category, and that's what I'm using to actually call the report service to add to cart. It should be cart, not card. Hopefully this is correct. Let me double check. Add to cart. Okay, it should be cart. So you can see that we will be receiving that product and category, and that's what we are actually sending, your product and a category as the payload. So I'm ready to go here. Let me just double check that I didn't forget anything. No, that was it on that one. Then the product one here, we just did it, and that's all good. And the last one is that one we already did as well. So we're good to go. I've modified the 3 files here. And again, you can use the corrections in the different branches, or you can try to understand it, do it by yourself. But I found the first option to be easier. So now that we did that, we're just going to be, I'll just kind of, you know, and again, that's where my ignorance in Node can show. I'm not sure I need to recompile everything, but I'm just going to assume that I need to do that. So I'll be compiling all of that, so now we have these new features within the website here, right? So if I reload, I should have all of that ready to go. So we've done with like most of the configuration at that stage. We can actually move forward to starting to build, to enrich that information that we are ready to receive in Customer Data Platform by building an activity indicator. So we're going to get back to the CDP and see how we can configure these things. But these are very, very simple, right? And let me just double check that I did everything here. I think I did everything. Yes. So let's create a new 5-shirt count activity indicator. So the goal of that is just to count the number of cards that will be of the t-shirt category, because we will be able to highlight people who actually buy or intend to buy t-shirts in our example. So so we were done there. So I can just kind of press done again, and I'll be going into indicators here. And I'll be creating a new indicator. So we want an indicator. There are several types of indicators. Some can be just about calculating things based on the other attributes of the profile. Some can be predictive indicators that are leveraging our AI ML capabilities. But the one that we're going to be using there is just like, you know, we just want to count the cards, or, you know, generate a counter of some sort about the cards, and do that just for t-shirts. So you end up with that new indicator, right? We'll give it a name, which is, we said it was the 5-shirt count, because that's what I'm going to be doing. We're going to be counting, right? So for the calculation method, you just drag the main object here, and we're just going to be counting them. We're going to be counting them for all time, but we're also going to be adding a criteria. And the criteria is going to be on the category. That's where, if the category equals, I think it was t-shirts, I'm not 100% sure of the case here, as in if it's upper or lowercase. So I'm going to remove the case sensitivity just in case. So if the category, so I'll be now counting the cart, people who add a cart. I mean, I'll be counting per people, per user, per consumer. the number of times that they add a t-shirt to a cart, basically. And I'll be able to attach that to their profile and be able to do some stuff with it, which we're going to see in a second with a segment. So I press save. At that stage, I have my new shirt. You can see it's calculating. If you already had a lot of information in your CDP, so if you're, maybe you already ingested like potentially dozens of users and of cards. So the system actually, once you design a new indicator, is going to kind of calculate it back for all the others, right? It can take a while if the database is big. Here, there's nothing in there, so it's just like indicating that it's in progress, but there's nothing to do because I haven't started yet. The step number 2 here is that we are now going to create a segment, and the idea behind here, as you remember, I said it's all good to kind of gather the information and build a 360, but a big component from a customer data perspective is also to actually enrich that information, right? So, and that's what we're doing here. Now that we've identified the number of t-shirts that people actually put into the cart, what we can do is that we can actually segment them based on it, right? So we're going to create a new segment with 2 values, either a fan or an enthusiast. Okay, so let me go wrong window. Let me go there. Let's go to segments, and we're going to be creating a new segment. And that new segment, we're going to call it t-shirt lover, for instance. Here you go. And I'm going to be adding 2 values, and these 2 values are specified here, right? I'm going to start with enthusiast here, and so enthusiasts for people who are really, big into the number of t-shirts that they have. And you can see it's not in a profile, but you can see that 5 shirt count is available now. So I can say, okay, people who buy at least, or who add at least 5 t-shirts to their cart, will be putting them as in the t-shirt lover segment with the value of enthusiast, or they can be just a fan, for instance. I'm not sure that it's the proper order for these 2, but I'll play with what is in the documentation. So if it's greater than 2, I'll use greater than. So, well, no, I'll use at least. So it's more or equal, right? If it's at least, or if it's greater than, then it's just more. Note that the first one, you see the order of these values, right? So the first one that matches enthusiast, yeah, that was good. The first one that matches is the value that you get, right? So that's where either you want to add other, criteria to say at least 5 and or that one to be at least 2 and less than 5, so you kind of avoid any conflicts. Or if you just have like an order which is pretty simple like that, you can just know that, okay, if it's 5, you get assigned the enthusiast and you kind of skip the next one. Well, if it's less than 5, then you actually check the second one, and more than 2, then you actually are assigned that value. So the order kind of matters depending on how you actually design this criteria. So just bear that in mind. You can obviously have things much more complicated than that, right? You can actually combine more, that with a profile. You could say people who, I don't have the zip code here, but you could add that on geography. You can really combine that in a very detailed way. But here we'll keep it just simple, and we're just going to press save. So now we have our t-shirt lover segment created. We have our indicator about that actually powers that segment, basically, that is created. And we have our shop that is running and be able to do these things, to actually provide that information. As you can see, I have like carts. My cart is not empty because I've already kind of run the scenario a couple of times. I should have cleared my cache for that browser window, but I didn't. So bear with me. You should have 0, and it's kind of normal. And when we actually go to the cart, you'll see that it's pretty full, but all of that obviously was on another CDP business unit. So you won't see these 10 orders because they were just basically in my browser here. So just ignore that what happened before at that stage. But what we want to do is that we want to start adding stuff to the cart. So let's start with the beanie, for instance. I'll just click on the beanie and add to cart. And you can see that it's been added to the cart, and the CDP should have received that at that stage, right? I'll kind of show you a bit of troubleshooting if you have any troubles with that. For instance, if you didn't enable that domain into if you remember one of the stages, we actually specified localhost. Then you will get an error when you actually push that data to CDP. I mean, not an error, it's just going to basically refuse the payload. So it's not going to work, but here it should. So we'll get there. So let's go and check what happened. Let's go check what happened, because I did add something to the cart. The logic of that application should be to notify the CDP that something happened. So let me go to search and just refresh. And you can see we got our first kind of user record in the CDP database. And for now, obviously, it's pretty empty, right? There's nothing much. There's the overview screen here is mostly about like orders. So, well, there's not a lot of data, but we can see the first activity that we had, right? And it's a cart. And you can see the content of the cart. We got the product and we got the category. So it was not a shirt, right? It was not a t-shirt, which is why the activity indicators that we just have the total number of cards. So we always count the number of cards in any case. That one is set to 1, but that's it. We'll talk about trust in a later exercise. And here the details, you can see that the only attribute that we got is basically the device ID. That's the only thing that we actually have as a identifier of that profile, because I just add something to cart. I'm anonymous from that perspective. And I'm not part of any segment. Let me zoom out a little bit so it looks better. I'm not part of any segments yet. So it's kind of normal at that stage. But now let's see what happens if you add something. If I add another type, and especially the one that matters to us, which is a t-shirt. So I go to the t-shirt, and this time I'm going to add the t-shirt there. So I add the t-shirt, and remember, this is all real time, right? So if I just go back and kind of refresh here, I'll get that information now. Well, just give it a second maybe, but it should be good to go. If I go to activities, I will have 2 activities now. I'll have one, which was, the beanie, and then we have the t-shirt. But look at what happened with the activity indicators at that stage, is that now we have the five shirt count that was actually incremented to 1. Right? Because we test if you remember, we test the category here. So only 1, so we're good to go. In terms of the details here, I'm still not member of any segments, because if you remember, we needed 2. So let me go back here and add another one to the cart. Okay, go back to CDP, kind of refresh. I don't know if the fastest is to refresh or go back to the list and go back there. And here you go. I'm now a fan in a t-shirt lover segment, because if I go to activities, you can see that we got our 3rd activity from the front end, which is another t-shirt, which means that now our counter here, our 5-shirt counter, was set to 2, which means that we qualify for the segment, right? And this concludes the first exercise. I don't know from a kind of process standpoint if I should take maybe a couple of minutes to listen if there's any questions or if there's anything that someone misunderstood at that stage. I understand that you should be able to ask questions and let me know if there are any, even though I'm not sure how I'm going to know about your questions. But in any case, maybe just like 1 minute to digest and allow you the opportunity to ask questions. Okay, I'm assuming there were no questions. Again, the instructions are pretty straightforward. If you have issues with the code base, as you remember, you can always kind of jump to the exercise branch. Exercise 1 branch. Just remember to update your identifiers there, and that's it. You should be basically ready to go with that. And the configuration at the CDP level is pretty straightforward, so you should be good to go. So if there's no question for the exercise 1, I'll switch to exercise 2 because the clock is ticking and there's a fair amount to cover still. So let me go to exercise number 2. And as I said before, here we want to build the knowledge, right? So for now, we just have like a device identifier. This is not much. This is not going to be very useful to us. So what we would need to do, we need to do 2 things. We need to detect that people actually are, we need to kind of change the code on the mock commerce website to add our authentication, the SAP Customer Data Cloud configuration. So we'll add another SDK and kind of do a bit of configuration there. So basically the system, the system knows when you are logged in and when you're not logged in. So we'll be doing that. Then we will be actually taking, now that people will be able to log in, they will provide, not only log in, but register as well. They'll be able to provide some pieces of information. So we are going to configure the Customer Data Cloud connector in CDP as well. And we'll see how that works. And that's pretty much it. So it's pretty straightforward. That one should be faster than the previous exercise. So let's go to the first step, which is go back into, let me get my exercise on the other screen. So I don't need to go back and forth. Here you go. So we'll go back to the CDP configuration, and now we're going to add another source, right? It's pretty, and for now we had the mock commerce, and the new source that we're going to add, the first thing that we want to do is that we want to get like the on-login event, because we want to kind of make sure that we get people in the system, right? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a new event here. And that one is going to be called on login, right? And bear in mind, the goal here is that we might want to trigger things based on the behavior of people, whether they logged in or logged out as well, right? So that's why also it matters here that we have that information. So so at that step, I added that the on login event. This is first party CRM data now. So I press next. In the data model, there's one piece of information that we need to add, which is that field, the CAM ID. CAM ID is, CIAM is the name of one of the other names of Customer Data Cloud. So we'll use that internal identifier from the Customer Data Cloud platform that we're going to be using, and we're going to be mapping it as well, right? So I have that on login event. I press next. And now I just need to map things to the profile, right? So the CAM ID is going to be coming here, and we'll be able to map it to the CAM ID in the configuration and in the main profile object that we have at the CDP level. And that's all we're going to do. That's going to be enough to basically join the device ID and the CAM ID. So next time someone logs in, you already know who they are. You'll know instantly who they are. And you'll be able to gather that anonymous stage with the authenticated stage, basically, right? So when we get that event, the customer data platform will know that, okay, these two identifiers, the device ID that I've been using before and the CAM ID that is going to be provided by the on login event, are indeed the same profile, and that's going to allow us to merge basically that anonymous behavior from the front end and all that rich first party information that we'll be ingesting from somewhere else, right? That really allows us to do identity resolution and to merge these two streams of information into a single 360. So it's kind of a key concept to remember. So I mapped it. Yep, it's done. So I can press next at that stage. So now we have a new, so that bit doesn't change, right? So because we already in the front end code, we already kind of ingested that bit, right? So there's nothing there that we need to do. However, what we need to do is that we need to add that on login event as well, right? So we'll be doing that in a code in a second. So yeah, the instructions are actually saying to actually do that there. I'll do that, when I do the code towards the end rather than now. So I'll go straight to the next stage. I'll go back to actually changing the code towards the end of the exercise. So the next step that we're going to do is that we're going to create we're going to add a new connector into CDP, and that connector is going to be with Customer Data Cloud. So you just go to we'll be using that all the user keys and secrets. These ones everyone can use the same because we kind of designed a we're leveraging an environment that is the same for everyone, so it's okay. So I'll go into sources, and this time I'm going to connect a new application, right? And I just search for Data Cloud, and you can see that one. I connect it, and that's where we're going to be leveraging the user key, all these credentials that are. Oh, sorry, the name I'm just going to give it. I just call that CDC. Customer Data Cloud, activate. I go to authentication, and here I'm going to leverage the user key that is provided in the GitHub page. Ignore the autofill. I don't know why it's doing that. I put the secret as well. Hang on, let me double check that is the proper secret. So I'll use that secret here. Here you go, and the API key, you take it from there as well. Again, copy paste to avoid issues. And then I can go to the configuration stage, which is just about the API base URL. Here, we're actually hosting in the US. So you see here, the URL is US1 rather than EU1. So you can just copy paste everything or just change EU from US. Pretty simple. And you press create. And that creates a new source and destination, but mainly a new source application. And you can see here all the potential inbound payloads or events that we can get from it. We can't add any new ones because that application kind of supports out of the box these 4, and we'll be configuring one of them, which is the get full accounts in batch. So you can see that's the next step here. We'll be editing the get full accounts in batch and providing the right level of information. So that's that one. I can just, I can decide to just, enable it, for instance, even though, oh yeah, it's empty now. So I'll go and edit it first. So let me edit it. And we'll be doing what the instructions are doing, right? So this is receiving first-party data. We'll leave the purpose alone again, so we can just go to the next stage. As you can see, that connector comes with its own kind of data model, which is mapped to the out-of-the-box data model that you have in Customer Data Cloud, knowing that if you have like custom fields, which is something that can happen a fair amount, they should be positioned in, should be a data object somewhere. Yeah, data here. So if you have if you define custom fields in your Customer Data Cloud instance, then you want to create the same here, and that means that the payloads are going to be filled automatically, even for the custom fields. So it's pretty straightforward. So I go next, and here I'm going to do the mapping. And here obviously you can grow that mapping and have way more types of informations. But for now, we're just going to be doing first name. We're going to be doing last name. I think the email, yes, we'll take the email from the profile object here and map that to the primary email. And we'll be mapping the CAM ID as well. So the CAM ID is called UID in there. So I'll take the profile UID. Let me check. Yes, the profile UID and mapping it to the CAM ID. So, and you can see here, we're not mapping the device ID, right? So you remember, so we have three kind of events. One that is just the device ID, one that is just the CAM ID, and one that is both of them. And that's how that one that does both of them is what allows us to actually merge under the same profile. I press next. And I'm going to schedule the polling of information. So we're working on a new version of that connector. That's going to be real time and more push than pull. But for now, you can already kind of pull that information in a scheduled way. I'll do that every 15 minutes. But we'll see as we go, you can trigger it manually. So for testing purposes, for instance, you can just go and press ingest now, and it's going to ingest automatically. I mean, it's going to manually ingest the information. Because just another side note is that because they are that customer data cloud instance is going to be shared between all of us, you're going to receive in your database more than just your user. You're going to be receiving all the users of the group today together, right? So there's already ingestion in progress. You can go and you see, it already happened. The next one is going to happen in approximately 15 minutes. And if I go and view the status, you can see that I already received 165 profiles, because that's what already exists basically in the database, right? Okay, so that is set up. So if I go back to the instructions, we've basically prepared everything on the configuration side. Now we're back to doing a little bit of coding, right? So same kind of process. I'm going to stop the service on that side, and we will be reviewing the changes that we need to do. As you can see, the first thing you want to do is that you actually want to add the script to load the Web SDK, the Customer Data Cloud Web SDK. So that we're going to start by doing that bit. So one way to do it, and again, I should know better, but I'll be doing another comparison. So I go remote, and this time I'm going to compare with exercise 2, because that's what we're doing. So I compare with the working tree. And this time, I think, yeah, that's the one. And you can see there's 4 files that are going to be changing. Okay. So in the index one, so we have it open already. So that's cool. If I click here, I should see the differences. So no, I'm on the wrong one. I need to go afterwards. And sorry. Well, it's okay. We know what we want to get in anyways. I compare it to the wrong one. So let me just, close that bit and just do the code manually. It's going to be as simple. So the first thing we need to do is that. So I'll just open the index HTML here, and I'm going to add the other SDK, right? It doesn't matter. I don't think it matters if it's before or afterwards. So I'll just put that SDK here. Again, unlike the previous case where everyone is using a different CDP, here everyone is using the same API key, so you can just copy paste it as you want. It looks to me a bit weird, so I'm just going to edit that properly. It shouldn't be on multiple lines. Here you go. So pretty simple, just load to JavaScript configuration. So that's kind of step 1 that we want to do, right? Step 2 that we want to do, I'll go back there and compare. I need to just do that. I think it was cleaner that way. So that time I'm behind 4 or 5 changes. So hopefully that one we should have. Hang on, let me delete all of that. So I'm kind of clear. Okay, clear the results. Here you go. And just doing the comparison with exercise 2 from what I have. It's all right. So the anyway, in any case, the index HTML, I know what we need to have. So basically we need to have that. So we are ready to go. We have the CDP SDK, and we have the CDC SDK, basically, right? The other, I was clicking each time. Okay. The other changes that we need to do now are going to be in the auth service, and that one, the content of that constructor and all of that data is actually specified in here. So it's just a matter of copy pasting that constructor and that refresh method into the auth service, which is actually that file here. So you can just open it, and we have that auth service, and I need to add in I think it's from the constructor to log out and show registration and login. We'll discuss what it does afterwards, right? So just bear with me as I add that code without messing up the rest. So from the constructor to that one, and I paste that, and we should be good to go. So that code, what it does is that basically make sure it leverages the CDC SDK to actually check what user is actually logged in. It also detects that when someone receives when the SDK detects the new login or a new logout, we're actually going to do that refresh. So basically, when someone logs in, we will refresh the information that we have about them and fill in all that information about the first name, last name, and things that we'll be able to actually leverage afterwards. But we'll also get the ID, which again, we're going to leverage when we actually push that event into the CDP, right? So that first stage is done. So we covered the off service, we covered the SDK. Now we need to cover the other two things, which is to plug that report service. Remember, that was the first step that I skipped earlier. We need to put the report service as well, and that one is pretty straightforward. I go to report services here, and you can see that I'm missing I'm missing a few here. I had the add to cart, but now I need to add the on login as well, right? So let me open the actual file that I have, and you can see that what I need to have, I just need to add that same, similar payload as we had before, right? So in the first example, we just pushed, okay, add to cart and the payload. And here we're just going to send pretty much the same thing, right? Same method, you can see, but just like a different event name, right? So we had the on add to cart. Here is the on login, which are matching. If I go back to the mock commerce that I have here, I had the on add to cart and the on login. So that's how the system knows which one to send where, basically, right? And as you can see as well, the payloads are a bit different. Here we care just about the KM ID, where here we actually cared about the product and the category, right? So it's a bit different. So I'm going to save that file. So that's basically 3 out of 4. The other thing that we need to do, so we have the off service. The off service was done. Yes, the off service was done. Yes, save. The product service now needs to be updated as well. Hang on, let me double check what I need to do. I did that. I think we're good to go. We are sending, let me just double check the report service once again. Yes, okay, so we have the report service. We have the product service. We already modified it earlier, so we don't need to change it. So we're good to go. And the index HTML, we actually have the JavaScript SDK loaded. So I think that covers everything. Let me double check. We did the report service, yes. And we did we injected the SDK, yes. And in all service, we modified all of that to do it. So I think we're good to go. So now that that part is done, we can actually just refresh. Let me just double check just one last time, just to make sure. Clear the results, and I'll just be comparing. I want to compare what I have with compare with head. Compare working tree. So I should see the differences between what I have. So that was that one that we did. And that was that one that we did. That was that one that we covered. The report service was added, but the auth one was already good. On it to cart, and the report service had all that information. So I think we're good to go. We're good to go. Yeah. Okay. Let's kind of restart the service now. And at this stage, so because we have that new SDK loaded, we will gain actual, if I reload, let's go home and just do a hard reload just for the sake of it. We're actually gaining, as you can see, I'm gaining capabilities here. I'm gaining capabilities to actually log in and log out. As you see from a previous test, I actually had like someone logged in already, so that you shouldn't have that. I forgot to kind of clean up my my environment, but that should already mean that I'm going to get like a new bunch of new people in there. And if I refresh here, you will see that I should have way more people in there. Why don't I have more people? Let me just refresh everything. Okay, well, I'll see why later on. But what we're going to do now is that we're actually going to create a new user, right? So if I go back to the website, I go and sign in, I'm going to create a new user, right? I'm going to use test 3. Here you go, and I'm going to use my name. And I'm going to create a password. Obviously, we could use like social or anything you want to use here, but it's kind of, you know, keeping it simple for the first step. And here, I mean, we'll use that when we discuss later down the road when we discuss the purpose and the consent stage. But for now, just get, you know, click everything just to make sure. That's going to mean that the test user that we're using now will be able to use it for the rest of the exercise as well. So now you can see that it moved from login to log out, which means that technically here I already have I have a session. Basically, I have a session from the Customer Data Cloud perspective, which means that I had an on login event that I was mentioning before, right? So let me actually check in customer in here. I should now have, oh, sorry, before it's known, I should have. I think I did an oopsie daisy, because I think when I did hard reload, I actually generated a new device ID. So it's not a big deal, but that means that I lost my previous cards. I lost my previous cards activities. Yeah, I did, but it's okay. It's okay. We'll survive that. But what I'm going to do though is that now that I have someone where I provided like a first name and a last name, but bear with me, they're going to be associated with that one, not with the other one. I'm going to load with Customer Data Cloud. I'm going to trigger the synchronization so I can get all these users from there. So I get that one, and I'm going to do an ingest now. And I can just pick a date. I don't care from where, maybe people from, you know, yesterday or something. I press OK. And I start the process. And that's going to import, that should import my new user in there. So remember the hard refresh that I did, that was a bad idea because it generates a new device ID. So just bear in mind when you do your own test on your end. So I think, let me check the status. So yeah, I got three new here. So let me get back to search here and refresh. Oh, CAM ID, what an idiot. Okay. Oh, I think I messed up some of the mapping, because the CAM ID was actually the CAM ID was associated, but not the name. So I'll go and check the configuration. That's what happened. Okay. Let me check the configuration in the CDC configuration, because I should have these first name, last name information. Maybe I forgot to map them properly. So get everyone. I have that model. Yep, I have the mapping. Mapping should be there. So I have another account where I have everything that works. So hopefully it works on your end. But the first name, last name not showing up. I don't know why. But that's okay. Let's go to search again and just look at the activities that we're going to get. It's a bit annoying because I don't know which one is which one. But if I get to details, you can see I have the device ID and the CAM ID, but nothing else. and the device ID is shared. So no, it was the opposite because I was pre-logged in before. That's why I had that problem. So sorry. So it's not the hard refresh that was the issue, is because I was kind of pre-logged in before and I forgot to log out the previous line. But that's okay. Not a big deal. You should have these users appearing and unified with their activity in there. What I'm going to use is that I'm just going to log out, because anyway, in the next exercise, I'll be able just to comment on things. I'll show you, you know what, I'll show you the results on my other account afterwards. For now, I'll just keep on building the configuration in here. It's going to be closer to what you guys are going to have, and I'll show you the end result in the end on my other account when I kind of prepared everything. So bear with me, and sorry about that, but I must have, maybe I didn't, oh, I know what I'm going to do. If you bear with me, I will just kind of cut here. And I'm just going to verify, because I don't trust myself on the code. So basically what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to jump and take everything from that branch and forcing the checkout and discard all my track files. So I should be now on exercise 2, right? So it's going to be a cleaner kind of setup where I didn't mess anything. And the only thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to go back to the index HTML here. Let me just double check that the shared of service, for instance, is correct. Yeah, you see all the code is proper this time. I think that's what happened. And I'm just going to go to the index HTML and just going to put my own code here, my own kind of identifiers. And for that, I just go to sources and I go to the mock commerce. And I'm going to go to, yeah, that one and the snippets. And just going to take these two. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. As I said, we'll kind of, move along and we'll go back to it so you can see the end results on my other test account. That's why I don't like coding live, because you always mess up something. Anyways, so I've kind of updated it. So I should have like kind of the end result of the exercise 2 clean. I'm just going to restart the system here. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go back to the front end. And as a logged in user this time, I'm going to, maybe what I'm going to do is that I'm going to log out and I'm going to log back in as, test 3 that I was using before. All right. And I'm also going to add something to my, let's add another t-shirt, for instance. I'm going to add that to the cart. So that should kind of, hopefully the code base is proper now. So that should get us a bit more information. I'm going to go into sources again. And again, as I said before, the new connector is going to do that in real time. So you don't need to actually do that. Even though, like, from a kind of production environment perspective, most use cases, the 15 minutes should be enough. But for a demo perspective, real time is always better. So let me do that and start. And I'm going to go and check the status. Okay, I got a few errors, but I got three records ingested. So if I get back to search and I update. Okay, no, I really messed up something. That's okay. We'll come back to it. But that concludes the exercise number 2, right? Where you should have the first name, last name actually kind of set up. And you should have the link between that anonymous behavior and the known behavior basically done at the CDP level. So let's move to number 3. And in number 3, what we're going to do is that we're going to actually collect orders from another source, and we also be able, on the path to collect these orders, we're going to review how you can actually leverage the processing purposes to make sure that you can potentially choose who you want to receive orders from within the CDP. So the CDP can be set up to only accept orders for people who actually consented to the marketing activities, for instance. So it's something that can be done, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do two things. We're going to plug to another sources to get the orders. That's number one. And number two, we'll be setting up the processing purposes to be able to control what we actually have or not. Sorry, before I jump into exercise number 3, I want to give people, again, I don't know how you, I think there's a system where you can actually ask questions, and we have moderators in there. So please let me know if someone has any questions, let me know. Okay, I'm assuming no, so I'll keep on going. So that processing purpose processing purpose. So we're going to create these processing purposes at the CDP level, right? And the way we're going to do that is by going into here, processing purposes. And we're going to add 2, right? And I mean, you can obviously create more than that, but we're going to create 2. One that is kind of we call it service, just to be kind of aligned with the rest of the system. But think of it as a kind of operational type of purpose. So it's what the types of data that you need to kind of manipulate and orchestrate for operations of the website. So something like if you need the first name, last name for the address for the fulfillment perspective, it's kind of logical that you need it just to provide the service. You don't need it for marketing purposes. And that's the other one that we're going to be creating. So for now, we're not going to be, you can actually control, connector per connector, how to potentially filter the information based on that. You can also filter what's going to go outside, right? So you can actually decide field by field what's going to be allowed to leave the CDP based on these purposes. But for now, we're just going to use them as flag, right? So we keep all of that empty for now. We'll get back to it. So that's it. We're going to create another one as per the instructions. And that one, we'll call it marketing. But the external ID, and you'll see why we need external ID. The external ID is going to be leveraged, is going to be is the one from the outside system. And because we're going to map that to Customer Data Cloud in the configuration I have today, one of the consents in Customer Data Cloud is called my consent. So we'll be mapping the external consent, which is called my consent, to the CDP processing purpose, which is going to be called marketing, right? So, and again, this is consent based. So I'm going to specify it there. Same thing. So I'm not interested in kind of filtering the data in or out at this stage, just to use the flag. So I'm going to save that at that moment. So now what the first thing we want to do is to actually start, assigning these purposes to people. And these purposes can be assigned implicitly or explicitly to most people, right? Either you map it to an outside system, or you just assign it based on where the information came from. And that's what we're going to do with the service one, right? So the service information, we're going to go as per the instructions, we're going to go into the CDC connector and make that any data that we get from there is actually assigned to service. But we're also going to map manually the other one, so that a consent is going to be mapped, not manually, I meant dynamically, from Customer Data Cloud. So I go into my source and I click on CDC, and we're going to edit. We're going to edit that one. And this time, it's not about what is required. Well, we'll use that down the road, right? It's not about what is required. It's what we're going to be granting, right? So this, I click on, I'll select the one that we want to have. So we'll grant the service one. So all the data that comes in through that connector is going to be granted that purpose. So that's the first stage. But then, so that's an implicit one. But then what we're going to do, because that object here has somewhere, if I click on, I can search for preferences. So there's a preference object here that will contain the consent that are captured by Customer Data Cloud. So I'm going to actually map them. And again, that's what is described in the, we're going to map into the privacy part of the schema. We're going to map these three things. So I go to the privacy object, which is here, and you can see here the processing purposes, and the very similar concept applies as well to marketing subscription, right? But here we're just doing consent. So I'll just be scrolling down to, maybe I can just, yeah, here you go. That's going to be easier that way. We have the preferences here, and the preferences, I'm going to map the external ID to the external ID, the status to the status, and the date to the date. Pretty simple, right? And what it's going to do is that the system is going to recognize if I have like the my consent that we described earlier, that one is going to be mapped automatically to the proper purpose ID in CDP. So I can press next. I'm not going to change the scheduling here. And here you go. And you can see that it should be working because I see that these are ingested. The ingestion is actually working. So maybe it's just a good old log out and log in is going to help me there. But hopefully again, I'll show you the other environment and how it works. So one more thing that we want to do is that we want to make sure, we want to control the priority of the different identifiers that we have, because as I explained, you can actually have like, a device ID or a CAM ID or an email, and that's what you use to actually recognize that the inbound information needs to be attached to someone in particular. And the system out of the box, if I go to matching rules, the system out of the box actually has a few matching rules that are predetermined. You have one on the CAM ID and you have one on the device ID, right? And you can see the CAM ID has higher priority than the device ID, which is kind of why we saw some of the behavior that we discussed before. But now, because some of the orders that we're going to get are going to happen on that other website, we're not going to have any of these two, because it's not going to be based on any of these two, right? So we want to add the email as a potential identifier that we will use to reconcile that inbound information with something else, right? So I just drag primary email in there, and I just want to say, you know what? I want to be able to attach an order, which is what we're going to do, to a profile based on email, because that order is not going to have the CAM ID and not going to have the device ID. So I press done. And what I'm going to do as well, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to change the order, because even if the device ID, for instance, is not matching, I don't care. If the email matches, I think to me it's more important, because I know it actually linked to like a proper individual rather than a computer. So I'm just going to change the order here and just say, okay, the primary email is number 4 and number 5 is going to be device ID. Makes sense. Customers can, create or delete, these matching rules. I mean, some of them are out of the box. You can only reorder them. You can't remove them, but you can add, very complex kind of identifiers or sets of identifiers to be used to recognize that a specific payload used to be attached to an activity against a specific user. So we're done there. Let me just go back to the instructions to kind of follow that. So we did define that primary email. So we're kind of ready to accept orders based on email. Is what we just did, right? And the next thing that we're going to do is that we're actually going to connect to a WooCommerce application. So that WooCommerce website is actually there. It's the one that is hosted there. I don't think I'm logged in or anything, but let me double check, because that's probably what annoyed me the previous time. No, it's all good. I mean, you couldn't need to anyway, so it should be okay. Oops, you don't want to see my emails. Let's go to the CDP configuration, and we're going to add a new application, right? So I go to sources again, and I'm going to be adding a new application, and I'm going to search for Woo and add WooCommerce. We'll just keep it simple from a name perspective. This is WC, for instance, and we'll pre-activate it so we're not annoyed. And the username is going to be the username that is actually provided in there, and the password is going to be the password that is provided in there. Here you go. And the last stage is in the configuration. We need a API based URL, and that's that one. So I just paste that in here, and we should be good to go with a WooCommerce connector. Let's create it. And here you can see that out of the box, that connector comes out of the box with very similarly to the one from CDC. It comes with a set of pre-packaged like inbound payloads, so events, right? Just double check something really quickly. All right, no, okay. So let's go and configure the rest now, okay? So the instructions tell me, let's go, because what we care about for that one, we actually just care about the new or updated orders in real time. So that's the one that we're going to configure. And that's the one that is there. That thing will basically receive any orders passed on that WooCommerce engine, right? And we'll go into the configuration to make sure we leverage the webhooks functionality from WooCommerce to actually do it, but we'll see how we do it. So next stage, we are going to finalize the configuration of it. So we'll listen for the orders in real time. This is, well, I think that caters as being like first-party data. You can change these data types, right? But it's just an indication. It's not necessarily used or having any impact at that stage. We are going to skip the purpose again, because that's where we're going to go and play for the fourth, the end of that exercise, actually. That's the out-of-the-box kind of, the payloads that we received that WooCommerce actually sent, right? And we're going to do the mapping now. So the first thing that we need to map is the email, right? And the email is going to be coming in the billing object in here. So I have the billing object, and I should have billing email, which I map to the primary email, right? And because we actually define an email as being a potential identifier for identity resolution, that means that that's all we need. We don't need anything else, right? It's a key here, so we're good to go. Then we are going to, so now that we've basically attached that inbound information to a profile, we can kind of ignore the rest of the profile and focus on the rest of the information that we want to gather, which is this time an order, right? And remember, we created a name, and we're going to leverage that straight away. So we're not going to be using billing now. We're going to be using line items, which is kind of the content of the actual order, right? And I'll be mapping the ID of that one. As you can see here, I have a bit of a warning. That's normal. It's because the one order can include several line items, and the decision we made at that stage is that if I make an order that has like 5 objects, it's going to be 5 orders at that stage, right? You can decide to map things differently. It also depends. Not every commerce system actually will work the same way. Some are going to be sending 1 order per item, so going to be kind of gathering them in an array. Here we have an array, but we will kind of flatten that array and have 1 order per. But that's okay as long as the rest of the information inside is actually there. It actually provides potentially more granularity on what to do and what to count in there. So we're going to be mapping the amount as well, orders not amount. So the total here is the where the amount is going to be. So that's done, and then the product name should be here somewhere. Name, that's here. And I'm going to put the name in there. Okay. I just got information that I did something wrong. So I'll go back to the configuration of the CDC one in a second. So let me press next. And we will be using, so that connector is leveraging what we call an event listener, right? So it basically exposes a webhook endpoint, and we're going to be leveraging that endpoint, and all the credentials are in there. So I could just copy that, and we'll be using that straight away into the WooCommerce configuration, which is the next step, right? So now that we did that, I can just take that webhook URL, the one with the query string, and you can go there, all of you. Just bear in mind that as we add more and more webhooks into WooCommerce, it's going to slow down a little bit the webhooks. So for now, I only have two: the one I created before and the one that I kept from a previous exercise. But I'm going to be adding there, and you're all going to be adding your own webhooks here. And the more of them there are, the longer it's going to take to go over them. So hopefully at that stage of the demonstration, it should be okay. I'm just going to add the webhook, and I'll give it a name. Well, this is going to be ILP, that's me, test 2. We'll activate it. The topic is going to be, we need to put that topic for 44444 order updated. So I'll go order updated, and that's what the documentation here is saying. So you do order updated there. Oops, that's here. And the delivery URL is going to be what we just pasted before. All right, so everything there. And I can just save that webhook. While this loads, as I said, I was told that the reason why we had a bit of a problem before is because I didn't do the some mapping that I did wrong. So let me go and check the mapping at the CDC level. I think it was the UID that I was not mapping properly. So let me edit that, edit the mapping here and double check it. The CAM ID, I didn't get the, okay, that seems to be okay. But let me remap it, search for the UID. Maybe it was coming from that other part of the object. And I press next. And I'll keep it scheduled. Maybe the other thing that didn't work is the other one, which is in the WooCommerce. I just can double check everything on login. Maybe that's where I didn't map things properly. Mapping. Device ID, CAM ID. So it should be okay. It should be okay. Next. Done. I'm just gonna kind of run the just gonna run that one again, just to be sure. Because again, I should have what it means is that in just now from yesterday. Okay, start. And hopefully this is going to work this time, but I'll let it process. And while it does, I'll just go back here and that you can ignore the error 400 here. It actually works. So my webhook is now being configured. So now that means that if I go back there, I'm ready to go. And one of the things that we will be doing is that we will start order something on that website. Passing the, well, this is where I'm going to have a problem if my mapping is not working. So let me give just 1 minute to double check that it actually worked this time. If I go to search, oh, here you go. So that is working. So okay, so you have test 3. That's me. So that was me. I think I messed up the mapping, but that's okay. I mean, bear in mind we should have like this map to this, but I think I messed up the mapping earlier. So that's what happened. You can see the users from earlier today, and that one test 3 is the one that we're going to use. To actually make the order. So it's okay if we don't have the CAM ID, because the CAM ID is used only on that website. Here, the only thing that matters is going to be the email, right? So let me go and do it. So here, I think I can, my account, I think there's a login that is supported. If not, I'll just go. So yeah, there's actually CDC there, but it's on a different system. And I'll just maybe I can just create a new account, but using that test 3 thing. So obviously, if in most cases you would have like some kind of SSO that is configured, so everything kind of works. But in that case here, it's not the case. But it also means that you can have like the flexibility to actually have two very, two siloed pieces of systems, and yet because you have identifiers in common, you can actually merge the data into CDP and build that 360 out of it. So now I am logged in. It's reloading. I am logged in. So Alex LP, I'm recognized. So now I'm going to go to the shop, and I'm actually going to order something. Let me just be careful about the configuration. Let me just double check that my webhook was there. Yeah, so test 2 is there. So I can go and add stuff to the basket. So I'll just add one for now, just a beanie, view the basket, and I'll actually proceed to checkout. And I'll need to put some names. So normally things would be, the WooCommerce recognize from the information I gave when I registered, but here it's kind of just a test environment. So there's not much that was already configured. I need to give an address. Oh, sorry, I'll just use my my address. I make sure to use test 3, so to be consistent with the email address here, just in case, and I'll just place the order. All right, so the order was placed. Now I'll go back to, I understand that you need to wait a few seconds for that webhook to actually trigger on the WooCommerce side. But basically, in a few seconds, I should actually have an order associated to that specific user, right? So we'll just give it a few seconds, and I'll refresh in a few seconds. But in the meantime, what matters as well is the kind of the next stage that was actually required here, which is that for now we are basically allowing all the orders to come into CDP, but you could decide that you actually want some form of consent to be provided in order to do it. And the one way that you can do is pretty simple. So for now, if every time I order, I would actually get into CDP. But what you can do is that you can control only the people who actually have the trust bit. So here I have service and marketing because I actually, that is coming from CDC, and I actually provided these two. But if I hadn't, maybe I don't want these orders to end up in CDP. And the way you can control that is pretty straightforward. Is that you go back into the event that we were having. So I'll go back to the event, which was source, and that was the information coming from WooCommerce. And oh, I didn't enable it. This is not going to help. Okay, let me do another order here. We'll do the other afterwards. Okay, after we actually select it. So let me go and edit that. And you see here the required processing purpose. I can actually say, okay, I will only accept that inbound information, these orders, if I have the marketing consent set in place. And we know that the marketing is actually mapped to that purpose is actually mapped to consent from the customer data cloud. I know that my user actually has it, so let's do another order, and that's why it didn't show up in the first place. So let me go and buy something else, and because my user actually has the marketing kind of consent, it will show properly. Let's buy a cap this time. View basket. And proceed to check out. And everything is still there, so it should be faster. Place order. And this time the information is going to come in. All right. So as I said before, because my user actually has, if I go here, my user actually has that marketing processing purpose associated with it, then that means that I'm actually going to get the orders that are coming in. Because we're kind of running out of time, and I'll come back to it and kind of refresh it to get the orders. Yeah, let me just refresh it, but we'll get back to it. Okay. Just again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them on through the attendee portal. If not, I'm going to proceed because we're running out of time. We only have 10 minutes left, and I want to cover the exercise number 4. So maybe I'll just cover the exercise 4 from a high level. I'll go, but I won't have the time to go through each of the steps. So let's go to exercise number 4. So here we're talking about doing a couple of more segments, and we'll see how we can actually do that. And we will also create a connectivity, but this time, instead of focusing on the inbound, we want to focus on the outbound, right? So the idea will be to trigger, to design a workflow that initiates an email being sent from SAP MRSys, and we will discuss how you can actually design it and leverage not only the information, the first name and last name, so you can actually provide that email, in a personalized way, but also leveraging the 360 information that we have from multiple stores or from offline and online to actually trigger and orchestrate these engagements based on that diversity of information, right, across all the silos that you might have. So let me go and start with the creation. There should be enough in 5 minutes to actually create most of that. Yeah, let's jump into it. So I have a chance to actually show you most of the items in that exercise, even though I might not be able to finish it. So the first thing that we want to do, we want to create a segment, right? And this time the segment is going to be basically just based on the total spend, right? So we'll call that VIP, and we will going to create 3 values, which are, gold, silver, and bronze. And the criteria that we're going to use is based on the order activity this time, right? And we just care about the total spend. Again, that one is pre-configured out of the box, but you could say, you could have like a category spend if you want it as well, right? So that's where you can actually go a bit further. So I'm just going to do that. And the total spend, if the total spend is at least 100, then I'm gold. If it's at least 50, I'll be not going to be I'm going to be silver, and if it's at least 20, I'll be bronze. So the rules that I said about the order from the previous time, they still apply very much. Now, let's because we're going to be pushing data out, we actually need to enable the data to go out, and that's where we're going to go back to the processing purposes. And we're going to change these two processing purposes to actually allow the data out. If you remember, there's an outbound data governance. And for the marketing one, we're just going to allow the first name, last name, and email, and that's it. So you know that when you actually trigger something, that's the only information that's going to go out into the marketing database, for instance. So that's a key point. The other one that we are going to do is the service, and for service, you potentially actually want more information. So let's say for the service, for the fulfillment, for instance, you actually want the full profile to be done. So that really allows you to leverage these processing purposes, not just as a gate to decide, yes, no, the data can go in or the data can go out, but you can actually filter down at the attribute level, at the activity level, to really decide precisely what data is actually going to go out or is going to be filtered in as well, right? So it really gives you the perfect granularity to actually do that. So we created that processing purpose. Now we're going to create, we're going to add a new application. But this time, instead of going to sources, we're going to go to destinations. And if I go to destination, so we already have 2 applications there because WooCommerce and CDC are both, as you can see with the little icons here, they're both sources and destination types of application. But let me add MRSys here. And I have like on that tenant, I have like extra connectors that are kind of custom connectors that we have here, but the official one is the one that is kind of provided out of the box for everyone, is this one. Again, the credentials are provided. So the name is going to be just, keep it simple, it's going to be EMS. The authentication, we have a username that is provided in the documentation here, right? So I took the username. Now let me take the secret. And from the configuration standpoint, the primary key that we're using in our interaction with MRSys is going to be the key ID 3, which in MRSys means the email, right? So we're going to be mapping the email to the key being the email in MRSys. But if you want to, if your MRSys instance, you're using another one, you can also do it. And this time we're not talking about events, we're talking about actions. While events were inbound payloads, actions are outbound payloads, basically, right? And we're going to be leveraging that one, which is how you can actually create a contact in MRSys. And again, we're working on another generation of connectors where this would be kind of done out of the box. So you don't need to have that action, or you don't need to add a CX flow just to leverage that action. But at that stage, I'm just going to be using that. So this is marketing as a category, and the processing purpose that we will be requiring are going to be service and marketing to actually push that data out. And we're going to do some mapping. Yes. Oh, sorry, I'm doing the wrong one. I'm doing the wrong one. This is not going to work well. I'm editing the wrong one. It's not contact list, it's a contact. Sorry, bear with me. I see I only have 3 minutes left, so I kind of want to go through I want to have time to kind of finalize. So let me just go through the steps rather than showing it. So basically, we are going to edit that, create a contact, and we are going to do the mapping for it. And then we are going to use the other one, which is one of the other MRSys actions, which is one that allow you to trigger an automation from CDP into MRSys, and we'll be mapping, the things that needs to be mapped, and we'll be providing the ID of the automation, basically, that we're going to be using there. And then we're going to be creating 2 flows, one that basically pushes any new users from CDP into MRSys. And again, our next generation of connectors will kind of do that in the background, so you don't need to do that. So that makes sure that whoever you want to send an email to already exists in the MRSys database, basically. And then the true value here is going to be when you actually reach VIP Gold. So if you purchase more than 50, then we will trigger the sending of an email campaign from MRSys standpoint to the end users, right? So it really shows the kind of the orchestration capabilities. And again, leveraging all the, not just from an orchestration standpoint, but leveraging all the silos of information, that anonymous information that we got first, then that first party information that we got from the CDC standpoint, then you could have, tickets from CRM, or you could have, offline information from a point of sale system, and you gather all of that into that 360 view, and you leverage that to enrich and orchestrate external systems for perfect personalized engagements, basically. I see we actually got the order. Just wanted to show that, despite my clumsiness at doing the mapping earlier. I'm very sorry about that, but we did get the order. So if I were to order something else, we saw 16. I think that's what we just ordered there. And let me just, in the 1 minute that we have left, let me go to the shop. And just to kind of highlight that the segment, buy something quite expensive, let's say a hoodie. So between these 2 orders, we're going to get like to more than 50. So that should get us into the next tier, the next 2 tiers actually. That should get us gold in the VIP segment. So let me just place the order, and we'll give it a few seconds. But I think we reached the end of the time that was allocated to us. So I'll try to refresh in a few seconds, but hopefully you found this interesting. I'm very sorry we couldn't go through everything, but you can still, all the documentation is there. If you follow the steps better than what I did, you should be able to get it to work better than what I had on screen. But I guarantee you this is my previous tries was successful. So the process is right. The execution was a bit clumsy today, but that's what happens when you talk as you do stuff. Hopefully you learn, you found it interesting and you learned how to configure. And again, remember the topic here was really to break these silos and build that customer 360 to be able to leverage that information, personalize properly, orchestrate new types of engagements that are going to be personalized as well, and across your IT landscapes. Thank you for your attention. I think this is the end of the transmission. So hopefully everything have a great day, and feel free to contact us if you have more questions. Thank you.